Good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock in Radio Cairo. This is World of Info coming live from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk, and Manel Zakaria is at the controls today. The shadow of your smile. And this beautiful afternoon in Cairo, we have the pleasure and honor to have with us His Excellency Ambassador Frank Hartmann, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany in the Arab Republic of Egypt. And it's really a great pleasure to have such a seasoned diplomat to be our guest in this beautiful afternoon. Sir, thank you very much for coming.
So I'm very happy to be here, Amr Mabrouk. It's an honor to be in this program, and I'm very happy to speak a bit about Germany, about Egypt, Germany and Egypt, our bilateral relations on any aspects, and I'm really honored and flattered to be here in your program.
It's a great pleasure and honor, sir. First, we have to start with this beautiful, colorful career of yours. You have started working in the Foreign Service of Germany in 1993, but before that you had a degree, a diploma in political science, and studied international relations and China study in Frey University, Berlin, and studied even in Chinese University in Hong Kong. So you are an expert in Chinese, China as a country and as a political system, and even working in China for some time in a German embassy from 1996 to 1999 in Peking, and first secretary in the Parliament and Cabinet Desk of Federal Foreign Office, and political counsel in German embassy in Tokyo. You're still in Asia, but you had also a slight shift in career working as chief of the cabinet of the Deputy High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina in Sarajevo, and also head of the cabinet of the High Representative and EU Special Envoy for Bosnia and Herzegovina. A real colorful career working between the European Union, between Germany, the main office of the Foreign Service, and ending here as before coming to Egypt as a crisis officer, the Federal Foreign Office. And I believe this is, as we call the important kitchen of any Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the crisis management, where you are exposed to reports coming from all over the world. So with such a great experience to be representing here your country in Egypt, I believe always Germany brings here very seasoned diplomats to represent them in countries like Egypt.
Thank you very much. So indeed, I started my career in the Far East, and I'm currently landed in the Near East.
Yes.
And it's quite a broad portfolio I've been working in. Actually, I've been trained as in political science and also in East Asian politics. I dealt a lot with China in my history, and also with later on with Japan. But I made, so to say, further development on the Balkans. As you said, I worked with the High Representative Christian Schwarz-Schilling after the war in Sarajevo, which was a very interesting task to try to bring this country together, to reunite the different forces in this country. It was a kind of nation building, what we tried to support through our activities in the office of the High Representative. And I dealt with the Middle East and with Egypt. I worked in the Chancellery when Angela Merkel was the Federal Chancellor, and I prepared the visit of President Sisi to Germany. And we had an African summit there, so-called Compact with Africa, and Egypt was in the chair. So I've been dealing a lot with Egypt already back in 2015 and 16. And I came on the delegation with Chancellor Merkel to Egypt in 2017. I remember with Joe Kaiser when we inaugurated the big power plants near the new capital.
Of course.
Actually, the gas turbine power plants, which changed tremendously the energy landscape in your country, because it led to an energy and electricity surplus. And I think it boosted the Egyptian economy, and also it laid the ground for the later development of the new capital.
And I remember President Sisi was very much interested into the idea of bringing these refineries, beautiful electric producing companies from Siemens, especially from Germany, because he had great faith in the efficiency, and he led the negotiations to reduce the price as much as possible. And the German side was so kind to I don't want to use the word submit, but to accept the terms that the rough terms that President Sisi gave, and I think this is sort of a friendly sign.
Yeah, it was not only on the price, but the main challenge was on timing.
Yes.
Because the president was very eager to have this implemented within 2 years.
Yes.
But it's a mega project, and I remember well when Joe Kaiser said, I promise you we will do it with
Yes.
our efficiency, and they really had to accelerate a lot, but it was implemented in time, and it laid a fundament to the new energy policy of Egypt. And in the field of energy and technology, we are heavily engaged in Egypt, and we are very honored that the president is putting so high esteem in the German technology. And it's not only technology, it's innovation, it is development, and it's education. And what the president, I think, believes very much in, and that is another field we can discuss, is education. We are heavily involved in Egypt with the German schools,
Yes.
with the bilingual schools, the 7 German schools, and 34 others where you can study German till the high school diploma, the Abitur or the Baccalaureate. And there is a strong influence of the German educational system in Egypt, and many of your elite members in this country, in academics, in government, in the private sector, have been going through either the DEO school or the women through the DSB.
This is an extreme bias because I'm a graduate of English school, but I know the DEO graduates and of course the Bayern, the girls' school in Babylon are definitely very distinguished graduates, and I have a lot of my colleagues who graduated from there, and it really affected their personality positively. Definitely, a lot of them have led important careers in business and in education, and I have to admit that.
Yeah, and the president wants us to do even more in this regard. I may say that he is traveling to Germany soon on the 18th of July. It's in the context of climate politics. We're having the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, which is one of the pre-conferences to the COP.
Yes.
And of course, we are supporting the Egyptian presidency of the COP conference in Sharm el-Sheikh. And he is sharing or opening with Chancellor Scholz the conference in Berlin. And they are discussing about education because the president expects us to do even more with German schools. Or
we have 2
more.
German universities, and I'm very proud of the fact that the new university, which was opened into the new capital, is also more oriented towards technological education and high-tech education, which brings it more to a real hungry market, if we may use the expression, for students to get an education in this high-tech studies.
Absolutely. And the German university in Cairo is now celebrating this year its 20th anniversary.
Yes.
And I could say it is really the largest and most successful transnational educational institution worldwide. They're having 13,000 students.
Yes.
So they have bypassed by numbers. It's not only by numbers, but it's important, the American university or others. But in quality, in science, in engineering, in mathematics, in computer robotics, and lots of other subjects.
And
in medical in the future.
They said that they're going to build a hospital, and they're doing this.
Yeah, it's one of the best universities, and I'm seeing many young diplomats or engineers or experts, and every 7th or 8th is graduating from the German university.
And I think 10 days ago there was a celebration in Bonn about the German education, and the German university in Cairo has taken a part and taken a lot of prestigious admiration from the attendees about how far it is doing a good job propagating the German education all over the world. But since we brought the subject of education, which is one of the most important subjects that our president and our government is interested in, we have to talk about the German education. I really admire the fact that the German education has 2 important pillars. There is, of course, what we call not the forced education, but the important education for the youngsters from KG up till even 9 years of full supported education, where everybody is forced to attend this school. And then the 2 pillars or the 2 different roads of the vocational education, which brings a lot of I don't want to use the word technicians, but I use the word high technical support employees or workers who are capable of dealing with a lot of working stuff, changing the idea of the blue collars into a more advanced type of education that brings a lot of care for the people who are interested into going into the market of work, and the university education, which is totally free. And of course, a lot of universities like Heidelberg, one of the very most important and prestigious university in Germany, are all carrying the flag of free liberal education. How was that possible? Because to acquire such this and spend great fortunes on a free education, I want to know how this policy was, the German governments, the consecutive German governments were able to emphasize.
Absolutely. There are these two pillars, and as you said, the vocational training is extremely important for the success of our industry. It is not only the academic tuition and university education, but the skilled laborers, the skilled workers, that they get not only better training, but also more recognition in society. Those people who really do the good job in the companies. They do not all need a doctorate degree or magister degree or whatsoever, but they need a good training. And it is the second track, the vocational track, and also the universities for applied science. My father was a professor in the University of Applied Science in Cologne for machine building and processing. And his engineers get a diploma degree, but they are well accepted in the industry because the industry trains the people already in the university. And that is also the model for the German University Cairo, because industry, including German industry, is directly involved in the university. People are being trained at the machines they may be using later on in their professional life. So it's not only academic, it is practical. And that is very important also for our transfer of our cooperation to Egypt, that we are heavily involved in trying to build up a vocational training system in Egypt. We're having this VTech school in Alexandria and also one in Ain Sokhna, the Academy of the Egyptian German Technical Academy, it's called. And that is in close coordination with the German industry, because they train those workers and those experts they will need later on the job.
There was the Call Mubarak initiative, which was in the 90s, about this type of vocational training that I believe. How far is this program still going on?
That has been much further developed, much broader and much more intense. Call Mubarak started with a couple of schools, but now we are discussing about statistical figures of needs of the labor market, of qualification, of curricula. So it has much further developed. It was built on this initiative going back to Kohl and Mubarak times, but it has been much broader now, and it is one of the three pillars of our economic development cooperation with Egypt is the vocational training. And it works extremely well integrated with our industrial needs, with the needs of the Egyptian labor market and the needs of the foreign companies investing in this country.
So when we talk about the skills in the field of technical support and technical education and science and applied sciences, we have to mention the role of Germany in history, because where does Germany stand today in Europe? It's a simple question, but it carries a lot of pillars, because some people think that Germany, after World War II, has been totally destroyed and went back to the Stone Age. And I am sure that this is not the wrong idea. It's a very wrong idea, because, yes, Germany has lost a great devastation, loss of a great percentage of people. 6 million people between civilians and army members have lost their lives in such a cruel war, and a lot of damage happened to the economy. But still there were the German people who were highly educated and had a strong sort of belonging to their country, and they started building on what was there. And I know that a lot of civil factories were spared the destruction in war. So when there was some European voices after the war claiming that we should put Germany away from the industry and bring it back to agriculture only, there was a man who had the vision by the name of Konrad Adenauer, who said, please don't do this. We are going to give Europe a kiss of life. We're going to give Europe proper factories, proper technical support, and we'll never go into war again. And we'll write whatever you want, but please don't destroy our factories. So we talk about Adenauer for a minute, because I believe this is the godfather of Germany of today. What do you think of his role?
Yes, in fact, we had to rebuild our country, that is correct, in 1945. We had to rebuild our society, but we didn't start from scratch.
Yes.
We had to reflect on the responsibility Germany has taken over in the Second World War, causing the World War. And this took quite a long time in the 1950s until the early 60s, but that was a strong and very important self-reflection process we underwent in the society, in our education, to develop a new and democratic and reflective society, taking up our own responsibility in Europe. And what was very important for us was the integration in Europe and the friendship and the reconciliation with France. And there Adenauer and Charles de Gaulle were the two leaders who brought the two countries together. After the starting from scratch, after the war, having all these grudged feelings of hate and of personal memories, of lost relatives and so on. And they built upon building up new societies and trying to reconcile Germany and France. And that was where it started.
The agreement of 1964, I believe it could never have happened if Adenauer and de Gaulle were not on the helm of power.
Exactly. And how they did it through youth exchange. It starts with young people, overcoming cliches, starting to talk, getting known to people, city-to-city partnerships. It is not only a top-down thing, but it's a bottom-up development. You have to get friends in France, you have to learn the language, you have to travel there, and you have to open up yourself to trying to be willing to discuss also about the past. It is difficult, but that was the way we reconciliated our relationship with France, and it was the core of European integration. When the European Union was founded, it was 6 member states in the beginning. It was Germany, France, Benelux, and Italy, and then it gradually developed. And the European Union has developed into a peace project, and it is still nowadays in 2022, where we stand in completely different times, it is still a peace project and it is still successful, even though we had the Brexit and Britain decided to leave the European Union. But it is attractive that you can see that we are discussing about enlargement, and we have enlarged and made friendship and reconciled with our Eastern European neighbors. We have now 9, as we had before, 9 neighbors of Germany in the heart of Europe, and we have the best possible friendship with all of them. And that is unique after 1990, after the German unification.
Of course.
It could have developed differently. They could have developed feelings that Germany is getting too strong and dominating others. But we reconciled, and we tried our best to reconcile also with our eastern neighbors. And that is a very successful project of Europe, and it would never have started if Adenauer and de Gaulle would not have taken, as strong leaders, the initiative at the time.
De Gaulle spent 3 years of his life in a prisoner of war camp where he didn't waste time. He studied German language from 1915 to 1918, German language, and he studied German literature and philosophy. And I believe that's why he was very much accepting the idea of the Hartmann Empire, where Germany and France were part of the same, although short-lived empire, but it was there.
And you are right. Cultural history, cultural identity, our literature, our arts, our music. Germany is and was a cultural nation. Yes, we did make mistakes in our history, but we are building upon a vast culture of literature, of music, of science, of researchers. Many of them, unfortunately, during the war emigrated to the United States, including Albert Einstein. But it is still a German heritage, and that's very important. And we are working, and still nowadays in difficult times, having the war of Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine, in Europe, but we are working for peace. We do not want a divided Europe. Also in our relations with Russia, we have worked a lot to improve our relations with Russia in the 90s. And therefore the situation which we are having now with the invasion there in Ukraine, it is a very pitiful, very sorry development, because we are having the post-Cold War peace agreement, which we worked upon after 1990 with the Paris Accord and the formerly the Helsinki and later on the Paris agreements. That was called into question now, and that is a very difficult situation now, having millions of refugees due to the violence and the fighting in Ukraine, calling into question the independence and the sovereignty of a nation. We must overcome this. This war must be stopped, because, as you know, many countries in the world are affected, including Egypt. We're having tremendous fallout worldwide in the financial market with the food crisis situation. Food prices are exploding. We're having millions of tons of grain being in the harbors in Ukraine, which we cannot get out for the supply heavily needed in the countries in Africa. So this situation, the war must be ended. It must be overcome. We do not want to see a divided Europe again.
Of course. This brings us to an important subject, because after Adenauer there came a lot of chancellors who were also first-class politicians. And I believe that their role, every one of them was delivering something to his follower that helped really very much in building Germany of today. When we talk about Willy Brandt, when we talk about Helmut Schmidt, and their role, even after leaving office, Helmut Schmidt and Willy Brandt did a lot of work in the socialist Christian parties and things like that. And when we talk, of course, about the role of Helmut Kohl in the unification, and Schroeder in his short term, but his great refusal to be involved in wars outside, or for example 2003, the attack on Iraq. This gives us a lot of emphasis of the idea of peacefulness of Germany post-war, and the role of these consecutive chancellors, who although some of them were coming from different backgrounds and different parties, yet they always had the idea of keeping peace and prosperity. How could that have been done with different characters and different people?
Well, it was at different periods in history and under very different circumstances. You have the Eastern politics, we call it Ostpolitics, of Willy Brandt. At the time, this was the peak of the tensions of the East-West conflict. And it was right at the time to try to re-establish links of communication with the East, to trying to find a framework, which eventually was done by the Treaty of Helsinki, creating the OSCE, a framework of security for Europe. But the Eastern politics of Willy Brandt came out of German division. We have West Germany and East Germany. We didn't have any channel of communication. We didn't have any trust. With two different systems standing each other, highly weaponed, highly armored, with potential conflict. You had the Berlin crisis, you have the Cuba crisis, and Ostpolitik was the attempt to establish communication links for a kind of detente, respecting that we are living in different social and ideological and economic systems. And it worked at the time. And for the first time in the early 1970s, it was possible again to travel, at least for some parts of the population, between Western and Eastern Germany. So for the people, there was a detente, there was progress. But as situation also deteriorated, when Chancellor Schmidt came, we had been working a lot to re-intensify our defense capacities. When we had the so-called double decision about reinstalling the NATO missiles after the Soviet Union at the time armored their SS-20 rockets. There was the peace movement afterwards going against that, but it was the rationale of Helmut Schmidt, who initially was defense minister before he became chancellor, that in case it goes wrong, and unfortunately nowadays we see what kind of military conflict is possible in Europe, we have to be prepared. We should not underestimate that, even nowadays. We are a peaceful nation. We're working for peace and reconciliation, but we have to be prepared in times of military conflict, and that we have to relearn these days under very painful conditions for Ukraine, that we also have to invest in our defense. And
you're increasing your budget nowadays, reaching almost 2%, right? Or even more?
Yes, we are reaching the 2%, and this is a investment which is being done after the armament and the investment into the defense forces has been neglected for a couple of years.
It was 1.4%, I believe, right?
Yeah, it is gradually increasing. The NATO target is 2%. But we have to reinforce our equipment, and that is, of course, an immediate consequence of the crisis. And as you know, the Western coherence or the solidarity in European Union and also in NATO has been strengthened by this conflict. Europe has grown together, as this is part of the unwitting consequence which Mr. Putin probably has not intended, but that is also part of the development, that we have been much more coherent in European Union. We have unified, and also in NATO. NATO is being enlarged for Sweden and Finland right now.
Well, it's definitely the crisis is putting a very heavy shadow on a lot of big parts of the world. Hopefully it never goes up to becoming a world crisis. But after the break, we need to talk about the pillars of growth. We have talked about education. We have talked about technology. We have to talk about how healthcare and COVID challenges have affected the German country. But after the break, work going on with His Excellency Ambassador of Germany, Mr. Frank Hartmann, the Ambassador of Federal Republic of Germany in the Arab Republic of Egypt. And we are talking about Germany, and before we go about German-Egyptian relations in the health cooperation, we talk about the health system in Germany. Before the unification, I mean, there has been three critical periods in the history of the healthcare system in Germany. The great load that was put on the health system during World War II. And of course, as a physician, I know that in 1939 there was a great advent in the medical profession, which with the discovery of antibiotics, and patients started surviving after great trauma. And in World War II, there was a great progress in medicine, but there was a great load put on all the health service all over the world, and especially in Germany with the destruction that happened. So there was a big load that was put on the health care system by the end of World War II, with a lot of drawbacks. And of course there was the division and the declaring of two states, the East German and the West German. The East German had 17 million people and had a special system of healthcare system that was fully subsidized by the government, and the Western system, which was partially subsidized by the government and more sophisticated. You needed a lot of insurance or health insurance to have policies to be given to these workers and to these citizens. So tell us about this health system after the unification, after 1990, and the initiative of Helmut Kohl to try to upgrade and integrate both systems into one healthcare system, trying to maintain a state-of-art service for the citizens, please.
Yeah, it was one of the major challenges after unification, also to unify the national healthcare system, which is basically relying on two pillars. And these pillars were then gradually also being built up in East Germany. But East Germany as well did have good public health service. So scientifically and also the healthcare in the countryside for 17 million inhabitants was fairly well developed, but it was all state financed. And our system in United Germany and previously in West Germany is based on a public insurance system, which is compulsory for everybody going for work, for students, for everybody has to be member of the public health insurance and contribute to it. And if you have an employment, your employer must pay roughly 50% of the insurance and the employee pays the other 50%. So that is compulsory. So the basic medical healthcare system is relying on the public insurance. If you want a better quality, if you want to have additional elements in your insurance, you go and beyond a certain level of income, you must go to a private health insurance. But you must have any kind of insurance. You cannot go completely without it. Private insurance is, of course, more expensive, but you may get higher quality of treatment in private clinics or also in public hospitals. And that system was built up in East Germany as well. But in the transition, of course, as you mentioned, that could only be done through tremendous investment by the government. Because the guarantee for the financing of this system eventually, in the end, relies on support by the government. If there are deficits in the public insurance, it has to be covered by taxpayers' money. But basically relying on the insurance model, but the state in the end is a guarantor for the public health insurance.
And of course this was quite difficult because I believe that Chancellor Kohl has met a lot of challenges trying to get allocations of all this huge sum of money to upgrade all the systems in the Eastern Republic when the unification happened. You have invested a lot, but you believe this was the only right track, right, sir?
Yes, well, it led to temporarily increased tax rates in West Germany, and we had to pay a so-called solidarity contribution, which was a kind of a unification tax, and that was relating not only to health insurance, but to education, building up a unified modern university system, infrastructure development, roads, bridges, railways had to be rebuilt and improved, housing, public housing. So, of course, for the years after unification, from 1919 until today, and we just recently have got rid of this additional tax burden. So for the 32 years nearly in between, there was an additional tax for the consequences of unification. So that burden had been laid on also the next generation, but it will not go to the future generations. Basically, the costs of unification have been covered, and there have been additional and new creative forces being developed also in the Eastern German universities. New creative projects, new companies, startups also in the eastern part of Berlin or other parts of the country. So the living conditions and the economic conditions of the two parts of Germany have become more or less equal. And also this ratio of social payments, the retirement scheme, for example, is now, I think, up to 97 or 98% equal. So 32 years after unification, we have reached the same level of development. It took a generation, but I think this process has come to successful completion.
Did it meet a lot of opposition from the normal citizen or from the layman in Germany, or it was accepted as a part of sense of pride and sense of nationalism?
Well, in the beginning, there was enthusiastic feeling about unification. I remember I was personally in Berlin in 1989 when the wall came down.
Really?
And the people were furious. What was happening? Unbelievable change of history. Nobody in my generation would have thought that this is possibly happening. So we were taken by surprise by historic events, and we were enthusiastic about it.
Yes.
But we could not imagine yet in 1989, 1990 what the costs of unification will be, and also how long it may take to mentally understand the other side better and accept that they have been trained differently in a socialist system. We have been trained in a capitalist, in a market economy system. And I remember when I became part of the foreign ministry in 1993, I was in the second year of a united German peer group of cadets. So 2/3 from western part of Germany, 1/3 of the east. So they had just graduated from university in a completely different system, and we had been adversaries. I wouldn't say enemies, because being two parts of one country, you cannot really be enemies, but we have been trained in very different systems. And we became friends, but it took quite some time to understand each other, understand our history, why it developed as such, and how far also we moved apart after 1945 and 49, when the two states were founded. Our mentality was different. Our usage of language was different. Our understanding of world politics was different. And we had to re-understand, to open up our channels of communication. And that, for me, was a personal experience in my training phase in the foreign ministry. We did in our diplomatic academy exactly that. It was a kind of intra-German reconciliation. And it was successful. Now many of my friends, of course, are East Germans, many of our former East Germans, many of our ambassadors in other countries are East German, former East German colleagues.
The Chancellor Merkel was from East Germany.
Yes, Angela Merkel was East German, and also former President Gauck, and many of our diplomats as well. But now you couldn't feel the difference anymore after one generation.
But during Merkel's time, she had, of course, a very small career in. She was a chemist, and of course, she had a small career in the 80s as a sort of in politics, but not much. But for her to be sort of fully integrated in the system and even to become a chancellor, of course, she has done a great job in her tenure, definitely.
She came a very long way. She was a kind of junior minister in the cabinet of Helmut Kohl.
Yes.
She was in charge of youth and family, a smaller ministry. And then she became Secretary General of the Christian Democratic Union, the party of Helmut Kohl. And when, so to say, the transfer of power came and Kohl had to step down, then she really developed into a great political personality. But nobody would have thought that at the time that she could be the successor. It was impossible to think
successor
about that.
to Schroeder after that, right?
Of course, then Schröder was elected, then his government break up in 2003, and then Merkel was elected, and she was underestimated, underrated in a way when she started, but as you know, staying 16 years in power, and she just made it to stay a little bit longer, a couple of days longer in power than Helmut Kohl
himself.
did. She achieved a lot, and nobody would have thought that when she appeared on the scene as a junior minister in the early 90s, coming from East Germany.
As I always say, that nobody can doubt her integrity, and this is really very important and fascinating. And I had the pleasure of meeting some of your diplomat colleagues, and who had the chance to meet Chancellor Merkel, and they all admired her attitude, her sharpness, and at the same time her modesty, which is, I think, is very, very unique, right?
Exactly.
You have
I
met
worked
her, of course.
for her. I met her many times. I went to travel with her to 20-some countries, and we received 50 world leaders in the Chancellery within 2 years. And I was in charge of Africa, Middle East, and Asia, and Latin America. So we had lots of trips together, and she is indeed very modest. And she is a sharp thinker. She's not overly emotional, but she's very clear in her mind, and she's very fair. So that is something I think many world leaders highly esteemed with her, including President al-Sisi.
Of course.
He had very good relations with her. And I think when he's going to meet Chancellor Scholz in a week and a half on the 18th, they will start to establish a new relationship.
Of course.
And of course, they will start also develop trust and understanding, but it takes some time. And President Sisi worked a long period with Angela Merkel, but don't forget, Chancellor Scholz used to be the vice chancellor in the last couple of years under Chancellor Merkel, so there is a strong continuity, even though he's coming from the Social Democratic Party, and the new government does have another focus in some regards. But I'm quite confident and sure that they will have a very good exchange and understanding when they get together on the 18th of July.
We're looking forward to this cooperation. We have to talk about, before we leave the health and the politics of health, we have to talk about the Covert challenge, because the Covert challenge have affected the world. It has changed how we look at the world of yesterday, and how we all suffered. Everybody on the earth has suffered the sort of the obligation not to leave home, or to have a house arrest, or to work from home, or not to be able to travel, and all these difficult periods that really have affected the economy and affected the well-being of human beings. How far Germany was successful in this, and of course the great loss of lives that happened in Germany until the vaccination started.
Yeah, well, I was at the time head of the crisis commission in the foreign ministry, so I had to deal personally with the COVID crisis worldwide, and I was also a member of the national government crisis coordination mechanism back home. And it took quite a while until we realized to what degree this crisis would really challenge our daily lives, and what tremendous impact it would have on our economy and on our social life. And we took harsh decisions with partial lockdowns, with closing down office work, sending people back home for the home office. It changed our way of lives. It did have a psychological impact as well. It did have an economic impact. Fortunately, the economic impact was not as severe as some people may have forecasted, but it took quite a while until we overcame it, because there were tremendous repercussions in world trade. You remember all the economy, many economies being highly affected, so the world growth rate was going down. International shipment was down, and still partly is, due to the zero COVID politics in China, because they do not allow the ships to immediately being unloaded, and there is this container crisis and ship crisis still going on. With Egypt, I think Egypt managed fairly well to pass through the first waves of the COVID crisis in 2020 and 21. and the government mitigated the economic impact quite well.
Exactly. Yes.
But now we're running into another wave of economic challenges, the financial fallout of the Ukraine war, the food security issues, lots of other challenges. So the system is really put under tremendous pressure. And with COVID, I think we are not yet over it.
Yes.
I personally have to say I just had it 2 weeks ago.
Yes,
First time.
I remember
for
you were coming to our
and we had
program
to
2 weeks ago.
postpone
but
our
tried to
program,
postpone our
and we
program.
are still having more than 100,000 infections in Germany a day. Yeah? It may be a little bit milder nowadays, but we are not over it. I think what the good thing we learned is our solidarity internationally and bilaterally with Egypt. We donated altogether 4 million vaccines to Egypt, either through the COVAX or bilaterally. And I was also involved with the World Health Organization, 9 or 10 million surgery masks in the initial phase we donated to Egypt. And later on, you developed your own vaccination production in cooperation with China.
Yes.
But we still have a long way to go, I think, in developing new vaccines, in adapting to the new variants of the virus, now the Omicron virus. People don't take it very much serious anymore because they are tired from the measures we have taken in both our societies. But the crisis is not yet over.
Yes, I
and
agree so.
Some conclusions are still not yet fully being drawn from it.
Well, I believe that we can talk about COVID and COVID crisis forever, and we can talk also about the Spanish flu 100 years ago and how it affected the world and affected the peace of the world, because one of the most important people had this virus and he never came back from it. And of course, I'm speaking about President Woodrow Wilson when he had the corona at that time. When he came out of it, he was not feeling well, and he
The Spanish
yes, the Spanish flu, yes, and he submitted very much to Lloyd George and Clemenceau, who signed the Versailles Treaty in 1919 with very hard terms that really was producing World War II. So after the break, we have to take another turn. We'll talk about Egyptian-German relations of today and of tomorrow. So stay with us with His Excellency Ambassador of Germany, Mr. Frank Hartmann. So you're still listening to the World of Info. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Manal Zakaria is at the control, and we're having His Excellency, the distinguished Ambassador Frank Hartmann, the Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany in Arab Republic of Egypt. And we are talking about Egyptian-German relations today and tomorrow, because I believe that you are building of a lot of great steps that were made by your predecessors and about also your predecessors, even since very long time, since we have started having relations with the West German Republic back in the 50s, I believe, and of course onwards with the strong relations that went on in different perspectives, whether this is through economic cooperation, educational cooperation, and power cooperation. So President Sisi, as you were telling, had a very strong relation, or still have a very strong relation with the German government, or of course with Angela Merkel. So let's talk about today and tomorrow in Egyptian-German relations.
Yeah, actually, going back to history, 70 years ago, we re-established diplomatic relations with Egypt. And this year we are celebrating on the 3rd of October, our National Day, this anniversary. And but coming to actual politics today, we are building on a very solid basis, but we have a new government in Germany. The new government came into office in December. And it was my ambition to bring our new leaders, the Chancellor Olaf Scholz and the Foreign Minister Angela Baerbock, in personal contact with the Egyptian leaders. And I'm very happy that we managed to have one of the first foreign visits of the new and young Foreign Minister Baerbock from the Green Party was to the Middle East in February, 8 weeks after she assumed office. In a period where the tension in Europe were on the increase. The war had not yet started, but she came to Egypt and to Israel and Jordan and Palestine. And I was very happy that we signaled that we take a strong interest in what is happening in the Middle East. We want and we have to contribute to find a solution to the Middle East conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. I think the Europeans and the Germans have a strong role to play there, and it's also a matter of our credibility in the Arab world to do that. And I'm happy that we are preparing now for the visit of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Germany on the 18th of July, so in a week and a half. And it's mainly, the trigger was the so-called Petersburg Climate Conference, which is a preparation of the COP27 in November. But we are talking about the whole range of our cooperation. And you mentioned education is a pillar. And I know that the president is expecting from us to do even more in trying to help establish schools which are following the German educational model and partly curriculum also, to do, even though we are already heavily engaged in education in German in Egypt. The president is expecting more on that. And also technologically and by our industrial investment in infrastructure and energy. You may remember that recently the big contract had been signed with Siemens and the National Authority on Tunnels on the establishment of a fully new high-speed and regional train system and cargo system on the east-west and north-south line. So that will be a new railway system of 2,000 kilometers length, connecting up to 60 cities in Egypt. And the connex with the COP27 is that the emission by the new railway system, once it's being in place, our calculation is it will be reduced by 70%. So it is also a contribution to climate protection. And it does create lots of new jobs in Egypt. Up to 40,000 people will be employed for the construction and the management of the railway. So technology, education, and also, of course, political and regional relations are very important. And I'm looking forward to this visit. And in the autumn, we are preparing to celebrate our anniversaries. And we are looking forward to the 20th anniversary of the German University in Cairo, which you mentioned, which is a pillar of our network, not only between academics, but between experts, scientists, and engineers between Germany and Egypt.
Definitely. So we were talking about Siemens' role, and of course, in building the electric company and the electric generators that on gas. But are you also going to be involved into what we can call the clean energy, for example, the wind energy or something like that? Are you planning also to cooperate in this field as well?
Well, the new technologies are indeed the renewable
and of course the solar energy, yes.
The solar and the wind power energy. And we've been heavily engaged in that already, but we are willing to contribute even more to extend the large windmill fields at the Red Sea coast, and the large photovoltaic field near Aswan. But the new technology, the one coming up, and everybody's eager to get involved in that, is green hydrogen. Yes. And we are preparing now to sign an agreement on green hydrogen cooperation. And of course, also what is important is the export of liquid natural LNG, liquefied gas. There is a capacity growing also for the exports from Egypt and also from Israel, from the joint field in the Eastern Mediterranean to Europe. That is something which had been agreed recently upon the visit of the
We're talking about the Zohri field, right?
Yes. Mrs. von der Leyen, when she visited as head of European Commission Egypt, they signed this memorandum on the LNG export. So hydrogen is a future technology, and we are working on that. Gas is something we need, but if we want to reduce our fossil part in the electricity, in the power mix, we have to rely more on renewables. In Germany, we are increasing the proportion of renewables in the energy production from 38 to 80%. Within the next couple of years until 2030. That is one conclusion we draw on the heavy dependence on the Russian gas, is now that we have to increase our renewable energy proportion. There we cooperate intensively with Egypt, and as I said, on the new technology of the hydrogen.
Of course, Germany is very powerful, having a very powerful past and present and future in the field of transport, in the field of cars. And the German cars are very well known, motor vehicles are very well known for their stability on the road and for their reputation and longevity. So we had, for example, a sort of a factory of Germany, of Mercedes here in Egypt, but unfortunately it's no longer has withdrawn, and even the president was interested to bring it back. So do you see fields of cooperation in car industry? And of course, I would like also to emphasize, will the German car industry be more interested in renewables, whether this is in solar or electric energy, soon in their production?
Yes, of course. They are doing that already, and they have to do it because the European Parliament decided that there will be a phasing out of diesel and of benzene engines after 2035. So all the automobile producers are heavily investing into new electric vehicle technology. The companies we have had here, Mercedes-Benz and BMW, had final production lines.
Yes.
This was not a full, complete car manufacturing, but there are a lot of supporting companies who produce spare parts. And I know that there is the industry, the interest of the Egyptian government with the new automobile strategy to attract more investment in automobiles. But we need to discuss about the long-term investment conditions, and we need some more security also for the conditions of the legal transparency and also the fair competition. We did have an issue in the past about import taxes, for example. There is an agreement with European Union, our association agreement, that new taxes for imports for cars are not acceptable and legally not possible, but we cannot have both at the same time. You must have an open market, you must have transparencies and equal rules for domestic and for foreign producers, and then I think we can attract more investment, also not only from the big companies but also from the small and medium enterprises, which are the backbone of our economy back home. But we want to do more in this, but the conditions are still, in some regards, not yet ripe for
so
establishing.
So you're still working on it, hopefully?
Yes, we are in close contact with Ministry of on Industry and Ministry of Trade, of course, and the interest is there, but we have to prepare the ground for that.
Sir, we are running out of time, but really, you have to promise us something. You have to promise us to come back again, please, to talk more about the German-Egyptian relations, because there are a lot of things, and a lot of healthy water has passed under the bridge, if we may use friendly, healthy water has passed under the bridge. And we are really very happy and very proud that you were able to come in your very tight schedule, to come in our program and to share with us your thoughts about Germany and about German-Egyptian relations. And we're looking forward to have you back again, sir.
Yeah, Professor Amr Mabrouk, I'm really happy that I could contribute to your program. It was an honor to be here. We had a very nice conversation. Thank you so much. And I promise you I will make maybe in my next year, in my second year in Egypt, and I will spend quite a couple of years here, that we still have the chance for a second talk. Thank you so much, Professor.
It's a great pleasure. We had with us today His Excellency Ambassador Frank Hartmann, the Ambassador of Federal Republic of Germany in the world of info of today. My name is Dr. Amr Mabrouk. Manel Zakaria was at the control. Please stay tuned to Radio Cairo, and hopefully we'll meet you at the same time, same station next Thursday at 4, from 4 to 5.